the gonadotrophin releasing hormone and the somatostatin that is being released by the hypothalamus, it will reach the posterior pituitary gland directly. Anterior pituitary gland secretes all these hormones, including the melanocyte stimulating hormone, though it is secreted by the pars intermedia. So what are the two hormones that are secreted by the Neuro Hypophysis? One is oxytocin and the other one is vasopressin, which is also called as the antidiuretic hormone. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on chapter 22, that is chemical coordination and integration. I am Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru, Temple of Excellence. So we all know that in the previous chapter we had studied that the transmission of impulses or messages in the form of neurotransmitters or chemicals are by the nerve cells, that is the neurons, which forms the functional unit of the nerves. But apart from that, the neurons itself cannot perform all these message transferring functions. So therefore, there are some endocrine glands in the human body that secrete certain chemicals, that is the hormones, which play a very important role in carrying messages and bringing about the overall function of the body. So to begin with, let us study about the endocrine glands and the hormones. So what are endocrine glands? So endocrine glands are the glands that are ductless, means they do not travel through any tube or duct. So that is why they are called as ductless glands, because they do not have any ducts and their secretions are called as hormones. So the ductless glands are called as the endocrines, and those ductless glands or the endocrines which secrete certain chemical substances, they are called as the hormones. Now let's look into what exactly is the definition of hormones. So hormones are usually non-nutrient chemicals and they act as intercellular messengers and are produced in trace amounts. That is, they are produced in quite minimal amounts or negligible amounts, and those trace amounts of hormones, which are non-nutrient chemicals, they travel from one organ to other, passing messages like how exactly the nerve cells used to do. So this is about the hormones. So from where does the hormones get secreted? They are secreted by the endocrine glands. So we shall study about the human endocrine system in detail and what are the different hormones the endocrine glands secrete in the human body and what are their functions we shall look into. So the endocrine glands are hormones producing diffuse tissues or cells are located in different parts of the human body and they constitute the endocrine system. So human endocrine system, what is an endocrine system? So it is not just one part of the body or one organ of the body is taking part in secreting the hormones. There are numerous endocrine glands distributed in a body that perform the function of secreting hormones, which are very important for various activities of the organs to occur. Say for example, we have the pituitary glands, the pineal glands, the thyroid glands, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the parathyroid glands, the thymus glands and the gonads. Gonads are nothing but the testes that are present in the males and ovaries in the females. Both together are called as gonads. So in males, the testes will secrete the hormones. In female, the ovaries will secrete the hormone. All these are organized endocrine bodies in a human body. So there are different locations. So say for example, if I talk about the hypothalamus, it is present just below the thalamus region of the brain and that hypothalamus secretes certain hormones. Pituitary glands is also present in the brain that secretes some hormones. Then we have the pineal glands that are also present in the brain that secrete some hormones. And we have the thyroid and the parathyroid glands that are present situated in our neck region. They also secrete some hormones, and the thymus also secretes some hormone which is present between the two lungs. Then we have the pancreas which secretes some hormones. We have the adrenal glands that are located on the kidney that secrete some hormones. We have also humans, we have gonads as endocrine glands which secrete certain hormones. Gonads means in case of females it is the ovary, and in case of males it is the testis. So these are the different parts or organs or the endocrine glands situated in different regions of the human body which secretes various types of hormones having specific function. So these are the different endocrine glands that we'll be studying throughout this chapter, and how exactly they function, what type of hormones they secrete, all that we shall study. But in today's session, we shall concentrate on the hypothalamus gland and few other glands. That is the pituitary gland. We shall talk about the pituitary gland first. Apart from these, in addition, there are certain other organs also, such as the gastrointestinal tract, the liver, the kidney, the heart, they also produce some hormones. So, in the last session of this chapter, we shall discuss about what are the different types of hormones that are present by the gastrointestinal tract, the heart, the liver and the kidney in the human body. So, moving further, we shall study about the first hormone that is present in the brain, or the first the first endocrine gland that is present in the brain, which is the hypothalamus. So, the hypothalamus forms the basal part of the diencephalon, that is in the forebrain. So, we have studied, while studying about the parts of the brain in the previous chapter, we had studied about the forebrain, the midbrain and the hindbrain and all that, and we had studied the parts which are present there, right? So, exactly below the thalamus in the diencephalon region of the forebrain, this hypothalamus is present, and its main function is it regulates or it controls a wide array of activities or functions in the human body. And this hypothalamus actually contains several groups of neurosecretory cells. And we had also studied that forebrain usually they are grey in color, right? That is the cerebrum regions, the cerebral hemisphere of the forebrain is usually grey in color. It is called as the grey matter because it contains a lot of neural cells, right? So here also, because of that, this particular hypothalamus region of the brain, it contains several groups of neurosecretory cells called as nuclei, and these are the ones that actually produce the hormone. So, the nuclei, which are nothing but the neurosecretory cells present in the hypothalamus region of the brain, are the ones that actually helps the hypothalamus to secrete various hormones. And these hormones, they regulate the synthesis and secretion of the pituitary hormones. Now, the activation of one hormone depends on the activation of the other. So, if the pituitary gland has to get activated, then the hypothalamus gland has to produce certain hormones. Those hormones of the hypothalamus will then activate the hormones of the pituitary glands. So, that is how each of the endocrine glands are interconnected to one another. So, the hormones produced by the hypothalamus are of two types. One is called as the releasing hormone and the other one is called as the inhibitory hormone. So, the word itself says releasing hormone means the release of this particular hormone activates another hormone. So, which stimulates the, say for example, which stimulates the secretion of pituitary hormones, because the pituitary hormones, the pituitary gland secretes hormones only if the hypothalamus gland or region secretes the hormones. So, therefore, they are called as the releasing hormones. So, what are releasing hormones? So, the hormones released by the hypothalamus which activates the pituitary hormones are called as the releasing hormones. Next, we have one more kind of hormone secreted by the hypothalamus which is called as the inhibiting hormone. Inhibiting means to prevent something, to stop something. So, here the inhibiting hormones inhibit the secretions of the pituitary hormones. They'll switch off the pituitary gland, preventing the secretions of the pituitary hormones. So, we shall study some examples of these releasing hormones and the inhibiting hormones. So, talking about the example for releasing hormone and the inhibiting hormone. So, a hypothalamic hormone which is called as gonadotrophin releasing hormone. It is abbreviated as GnRH. So, when you write the abbreviation, you need to be very, very careful N is in small letter because it is one word, gonadotrophin, G, N, it is one word. So that is why releasing R hormone H. So these gonadotrophin hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus, they actually stimulates the pituitary synthesis and release of gonadotrophins. So if gonadotrophins has to be released from the pituitary glands, then the hypothalamus should secrete a hormone called as the gonadotrophin releasing hormone. So that is why this is one best example for the releasing hormone. Next, on the other hand, there are certain hormones which inhibit the release of hormones by the pituitary glands. Say for example, there is a hormone called as somatostatin. So this somatostatin that is released by the hypothalamus, it will prevent or it will inhibit the release of growth hormone from the pituitary. So various types of growth hormones are there, and growth hormones are needed for the overall growth of a human body. So therefore, if the pituitary glands are not active because the hypothalamus is secreting somatostatin, what will happen? The proper growth of the individual will not take place. So therefore, somatostatin is a inhibitory hormone of the hypothalamus. So this is about the two examples of the releasing hormone, wherein we have taken gonadotrophin releasing hormone for an example of releasing hormone of hypothalamus, and somatostatin hormone for the inhibiting hormone of hypothalamus. Next, moving further. So these hormones that are there, they originate in the hypothalamic neurons. We had studied, right? In the hypothalamus, there is a lot of nerve cells that are present, or neurons, which actually help in secreting. So therefore, these hormones that we studied, both the releasing hormone, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, and the inhibiting hormone, that is somatostatin, they are released by or secreted by the neurons or nerve cells present in the hypothalamus, and they pass through the axons and are released from the nerve ending. So how it is done? We have studied in the previous chapter, right? How they travel through the axon, how they reach the synaptic knob, and from the synaptic knob, how do they move to the post-synaptic knob or post-nerve cell, neuron cell, all that we have studied in the previous chapter. So just go and have a look at it. So these hormones, once secreted, they will reach the pituitary gland through a portal circulatory system, and they will regulate the functions of the anterior pituitary. So in the pituitary gland, there is presence of anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. So in the anterior pituitary, if the functions of the anterior pituitary has to be regulated, then the hormones should reach the pituitary gland. Next, talking about the posterior pituitary is under direct neural regulation of the hypothalamus. So here, this is direct. The posterior pituitary is directly connected to the hypothalamus, but the anterior pituitary is not directly connected to the hypothalamus. So the gonadotrophin releasing hormone and the somatostatin, they reach the pituitary gland. From where? From the hypothalamus. If they have to reach the anterior pituitary gland, then they need to pass through a portal circulatory system. But in the case of posterior pituitary gland, the gonadotrophin releasing hormone and the somatostatin that is being released by the hypothalamus, it will reach the posterior pituitary gland directly through the nerve cells itself. There is no need of passing through a circulatory pathway and all that. So that is the difference here. So now moving further, the pituitary gland is located in a bone cavity called sella turcica, and this sella turcica is attached to the stalk of the hypothalamus. It is attached to the hypothalamus by a stalk. So if you can see here, this is the hypothalamus part. This hypothalamus part, we have a stalk. And with the help of the stalk, the pituitary glands, both the posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary, are connected to the hypothalamus region. And it is divided anatomically into Adeno Hypophysis and Neuro Hypophysis. So Adeno Hypophysis and Neuro Hypophysis are the terms used for anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary is also called as Adeno Hypophysis, and posterior pituitary is also called as Neuro Hypophysis. So these, don't get confused with this. So it is nothing but, if you forget the term, you can even use it as anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. You can retain it like that because both are one and the same here. Next, moving further. So we'll talk about each of these one by one. That is, Adeno Hypophysis is nothing but anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary. So Adeno Hypophysis, it consists of two portions which is called as pars distalis and pars intermedia. So it is divided into two portions, pars distalis and pars intermedia. So here the pars distalis region of the pituitary is commonly called as the anterior pituitary, and it produces the growth hormone, and it will produce the prolactin hormone. It produces the thyroid stimulating hormone. So if the thyroid gland has to get stimulated, then the anterior pituitary should produce the thyroid stimulating hormone. It also produces the adrenocorticotropic hormone. It produces the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone. So therefore, hypothalamus can be called as the control center for different glands that are present in the body. So these are the different hormones that are released by the pars distalis region of the pituitary, that is the anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary, what all hormones does it releases? It releases growth hormones, prolactins, thyroid stimulating hormones, adrenocorticotropic hormones, luteinizing hormones and follicle stimulating hormones. So pars distalis secretes all these hormones. What about pars intermedia? So the pars intermedia secretes only one type of hormone called as the melanocyte stimulating hormone. But however, in human beings, the pars intermedia is almost merged with the pars distalis. So you cannot differentiate between the pars distalis and pars intermedia. So therefore, you can write it as anterior pituitary gland secretes all these hormones, including the melanocyte stimulating hormone, though it is secreted by the pars intermedia, because it is not possible to easily distinguish between the pars intermedia and the pars distalis. So that is the reason. So next, talking about the Neuro Hypophysis. Now we understood the Adeno Hypophysis, that is the anterior pituitary region, what all hormone it secretes. Now talking about the Neuro Hypophysis, which is called as pars nervosa, and it is also called as the posterior pituitary. So this pars nervosa or the posterior pituitary, it stores and releases two hormones called as oxytocin, and one more is vasopressin. So vasopressin is also called as the antidiuretic hormone. So in kidney function and regulation, we had studied about antidiuretic hormone and its uses, right? So that is nothing but vasopressin. And what secretes that? It is secreted by the posterior pituitary gland. And these are usually synthesized by the hypothalamus, and then they are transported axonally to the neurohypophysis. So I told you the posterior pituitary is directly connected to the hypothalamus, wherein via the neurons, the hormones will travel from the hypothalamus to the posterior pituitary, unlike the anterior pituitary, wherein they have to form a circulatory pathway if the hormones have to reach from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. So that is the difference here. So here, these two hormones, that is the oxytocin and the vasopressin, that is released by the neurohypophysis, that is the pars nervosa, which is also called as the posterior pituitary gland. They actually they are secreted by the hypothalamus, and they are transported to the neurohypophysis or the posterior pituitary gland via a network of neurons or axonally, because axons are the ones that actually transmit the neurotransmitters or the chemicals. So that is why they have mentioned axonally in particular here. So next, talking about the hormones released by the adenohypophysis. So what is adenohypophysis? It is also called as the anterior pituitary gland. In the previous slide, we had studied what are the different hormones that are secreted by the Adeno Hypophysis or the anterior pituitary gland, right? Now, each of these hormones we shall study one by one. So, talking about the first hormone, that is, we had learned that they secrete various growth hormones. So, oversecretion, what happens if oversecretion of growth hormones occur? Now, the term growth hormones means we understood that they actually help in overall growth of a body. Now, if oversecretion of growth hormone occurs, it will lead to abnormal growth of the body, which will lead to gigantism. And if low secretion of growth hormone occurs, it will result in dwarfism, that is stunted growth resulting in pituitary dwarfism. So, oversecretion of growth hormone causes gigantism, that is the person will become very huge than the normal stature of a human being. And the less secretion or the under secretion of the growth hormone results in the very short statured of a person or dwarfism, which is called as pituitary dwarfism. Next, talking about the excess secretion. So, excess secretion of growth hormones in adults, especially in the middle age, can result in severe disfigurement. That is, the person's body will completely become disfigured. How it is seen like this normal, it will not look like that. That is especially if the secretion of the growth hormones by the anterior pituitary or the adenohyphys, when the person is in the middle age, at that time if it occurs, it will result in disfigurement of the body, which is called as acromegaly. And this later on leads to serious complications, and also premature death can occur if it is left untreated or unchecked. Next, talking about this particular disease, that is acromegaly. So, acromegaly disease is actually quite hard to diagnose in the early stages, and often therefore it goes undetected for many years until changes in the external features become noticeable. So, inside what is happening in the person's body, it is not able for us to detect, right? Only when the symptoms gets exposed externally, then only we will know that that person is suffering from acromegaly, and it will be beyond the time now wherein no treatment can be given. So, that is why acromegaly is one of the serious disorders. Next, talking about one more hormone secreted by the Adeno Hypophysis or the anterior pituitary, it is called as the prolactin. So, prolactin, it controls the growth of the mammary glands and the formation of milk in them. So, prolactin, lactin, easy to remember, it is something related to the milk. So, prolactin, the proper development of the mammary glands and the proper secretion of milk by the mammary gland is taken care by the prolactin hormone. Next, one more hormone, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. So, thyroid stimulating hormone, it stimulates the synthesis and secretion of thyroid hormones from the thyroid glands, and thyroid hormones are very, very important for the overall development of the body and the reproductive cycle and everything. We shall study in detail about that later. Next, one more, that is adenocortico-stimulating hormone. So, this hormone stimulates the synthesis and secretion of steroid hormones called as glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex. That is, if the adrenal cortex, where is the adrenal cortex present? On the kidney. If the adrenal gland has to secrete glucocorticoids, then the pituitary gland, that is the anterior pituitary gland, should secrete this adenocortico-stimulating hormone. So, that is the time when glucocorticoids will get secreted by the adrenal glands present on the kidney. So, that is how the pituitary glands, the hypothalamus, the pituitary glands and the other glands present in the body are interconnected to one another. So, this is about the hormone. Next, talking about one more hormone, which is called as the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone. So, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormones are secreted by the gonads. That is the testes in the case of males and ovaries in the case of females. So, they actually stimulate the gonadal activity, and hence they are also called as the gonadotrophins. In males, the luteinizing hormone stimulates the synthesis and secretion of a hormone called as androgens. And androgens are very, very important for sperm production and all the male characters to develop properly. In males, the follicle stimulating hormones and the androgens, they together regulate spermatogenesis, means they regulate the synthesis or production of sperms in the testes. So that is the function of the luteinizing hormone in the case of male. Now talking about females. In females, the luteinizing hormones, they induce ovulation, that is they help in the maturation of the Graafian follicle. That Graafian follicle, once mature, it will rupture and release the ovary. So for all that, for ovulation purpose, from the fully matured Graafian follicles, this particular luteinizing hormone is very, very important. And it also maintains the corpus luteum. So corpus luteum is nothing but the lining of the uterus. So to maintain that also, this is very, very important. And it also helps in stimulating growth and development of the ovarian follicles in females. So therefore, for the overall development of the ovary, the release of the ovary, everything, for the development of the or the maintenance of the corpus luteum, for all that, this particular luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormones are very, very important in the females. So these are the functions. So because they are secreted by the gonads, they are these two, that is the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, they are also called as the gonadotrophins. Next, moving further, talking about one more hormone of the Adeno Hypophysis, which is called as the melanocyte stimulating hormone. We had studied, right, they are secreted by one part of the adenophysis, but because we are not able to differentiate between those two, they have been put under the anterior pituitary gland itself. So this melanocyte stimulating hormone, the name itself suggests they have something to do with melanin, that is the color of the skin. They act on the melanocytes, that is the melanin containing site, melanin pigment containing site, and they regulate the pigmentation of the skin. So what color the skin has to be, all that will be decided by the melanocyte stimulating hormone. So this is the function of the MSH hormone, which is secreted by the anterior pituitary gland or the Adeno Hypophysis region of the pituitary gland. So this was about the hormones of the Adeno Hypophysis. So about all the hormones we studied. Next, talking about the hormones secreted by the Neuro Hypophysis. So what are the two hormones that are secreted by the Neuro Hypophysis? One is oxytocin and the other one is vasopressin, which is also called as the antidiuretic hormone. So first let us study about oxytocin. So oxytocin, it acts on the smooth muscles of a body and therefore stimulating the contraction. So if proper contraction of the muscle has to occur when we are moving our arms, legs and all those things or doing various activities, then oxytocin is one such hormone that enables the proper contraction of the muscles. And in females, this particular oxytocin hormone, it stimulates vigorous contraction of the uterus. Contraction of the uterus is very, very important during childbirth. That is, if the child has to come out of the mother's womb, that is the contraction of the uterus is very, very important, and this oxytocin helps during that particular time. And also it helps in the release of milk from the mammary gland. Production of milk is by prolactin hormone, and if the milk has to get released from the mammary gland, it is this particular oxytocin hormone. So next, talking about the last hormone of neurohypophysis, that is vasopressin. So neurohypophysis is also called as the posterior pituitary gland. So vasopressin acts mainly on the kidney, and it stimulates resorption of water and electrolytes by the distal tubules and thereby reduces loss of water through urine. We all know that when the kidney releases urine, that is in the Henle's loop, the urine should always be in the concentrated form, right? Or in the tubules of the kidney or the nephron, which is a functional unit of the kidney, the urine has to be in the concentrated form. Otherwise, if the urine does not go out of the body in the concentrated form, then the person, it means that the kidney is not working properly. So therefore, if that reabsorption of water, the electrolytes, all that has to occur so that the concentration of urine gets maintained in the kidney. If that has to take place, then vasopressin hormone is very, very important there. And therefore, that is the reason why vasopressin is also called as antidiuretic hormone. And if the secretion of the vasopressin is affected, it will result in the reduction in the activity of the kidney, wherein the kidney will lose its ability to conserve water, leading to water loss and dehydration. So that is why, to prevent dehydration from a body, because when we urinate, along with that water comes out, but water, though it comes out, it is in very less quantity. But sometimes what happens, if this antidiuretic hormone of vasopressin is not working properly, then the kidneys will start eliminating excess of water along with urine. This may lead to dehydration and all sorts of other problems. So that is why antidiuretic hormone of vasopressin is very, very important. And this condition is called as diabetes insipidus. So why is vasopressin important? In one word you have to write: in order to prevent diabetes insipidus, this vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is very, very important. So this is about vasopressin. So this was about today's session, wherein we studied the different regions where the endocrine glands are located, and these different endocrine glands, what are the hormones they secrete. We started with the hypothalamus, then we entered into the pituitary gland, wherein we understood the gland secreted, or the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus, they activate the hormones of the pituitary gland, wherein we studied about different hormones secreted by the Adeno Hypophysis and the Neuro Hypophysis, and about each of these hormones function we studied. So we finished with studying the hormones of the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. In the coming session, we shall discuss about the hormones that are secreted by the parathyroid gland, the thymus, and so on. So we shall meet again in the coming session. Thank you.